Although FERPA was passed more than 35 years ago, it still generates considerable confusion among teachers, school officials, and school psychologists. In this short podcast, I'll give a brief overview of FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, also known as FERPA, is a federal law passed in 1974 designed to protect the privacy of a student's educational records. The law applies to schools that receive funds under an applicable program of the U.S. Department of Education. FERPA gives parents the rights to access and amend their child's educational records and allows parents to control the disclosure of their children's educational records. Parents may still have access without student consent if the student is a dependent for federal income tax purposes. It also generally prevents an education agency or institution from disclosing education records of students or personally identifiable information contained in these records without written consent. Important terms: educational records. Records that are directly related to a student and maintained by an educational agency or institution or by a party acting for the agency or institution. Important terms: directory information. Directory information means information contained in an education record of a student that would not generally be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if disclosed. Directory information includes, but is not limited to, the student's name, address, telephone listing, electronic mail address, photograph, date and place of birth, major field of study or grade level. Directory information does not include a student's social security number or student identification number. With some exceptions, the student has the right to have some control over the disclosure of information from the educational record. Except for directory information, personally identifiable information can't be released without the student's prior written consent. The student has the right to inspect and review their records. Students may inspect and review their education records by submitting a written request to the office responsible for the specific record desired. The responsible office has 45 days to respond to the request. A student has the right to challenge the contents of an education record. Students may challenge the contents of an education record which they consider to be inaccurate, misleading, or in violation of their privacy rights. Students have the right to file a complaint. Students have the right to file a complaint with the Family Policy Compliance Office concerning the alleged failures to comply with the requirements of FERPA. An educational agency or institution shall give full rights under the Act to either parent unless the agency or institution has been provided with evidence that there is a court order, state statute, or legally binding document relating to such matters as divorce, separation, or custody that specifically revokes these rights. Each educational agency or institution shall annually notify parents of students currently in attendance or eligible students currently in attendance of their rights under the Act. The notice must inform parents or eligible students that they have the right to inspect and review the student's education records, seek amendment of the student's education records that parents or eligible students believe to be inaccurate, misleading, or otherwise in violation of the student's privacy rights. Consent to disclosure of personally identifiable information contained in the student's education records, except to the extent that the Act authorizes and discloses without consent, and the right to file a complaint with the department. In a nutshell, all information about a student should be treated confidentially and should not be released without the student's prior written consent. The consent should be dated and should specify the records to be released, the reasons for release, and the name of the person to whom the records are to be released. And now, a few important don'ts. Don't leave confidential information displayed on an unattended computer. Don't throw records containing Social Security numbers and grades in the trash. Shred them instead. Don't use the Social Security number or student ID to post course grades. Don't leave graded tests in a stack for students to sort through. Don't circulate a printed class list with a student name and social security number or student ID. Don't include confidential information in a recommendation letter without the written consent of the student. And don't provide anyone with student schedules or lists of students enrolled in classes. For more information, see the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations or the National Forum on Education Statistics.